Shalom, Gabe Greenberg here, Rabbi of Congregation Beth Israel in New Orleans, Louisiana. We're recording this week's Parsha study from chilly Newton, Massachusetts. We every week study the commentary of the Netziv on the weekly Torah portion. This week, Parshat Mikeitz, Genesis chapter 41, verse 33. Joseph has been interpreting Pharaoh's dreams and saying that the meaning of the dreams is that there is going to be years of plenty and good and sustenance, followed by 7 bad years of famine and drought. Joseph concludes his interpretation with some advice. Ve'ata yarei Pharaoh ish navon v'chacham. Pharaoh, you should now find a wise and discerning person, vishitehu al eretz Mitzrayim, and place that person above the land of Egypt, meaning to take care of the agricultural and food systems for the next years to ensure that during the years of famine and drought, there's enough food stored away for the people of the country. The Netziv makes a small point here when he notes that ish navon v'chacham, the order of the two adjectives, navon, which can mean discerning or understanding, and chacham, wise. So the person is supposed to be understanding and wise, that those adjectives are flipped from how they usually show up in Tanakh. For instance, he gives a couple of examples that in Deuteronomy chapter 4, the nation of Israel is described as Am, Chacham, V'Navon, a wise and understanding nation. And there are other examples as well in Devarim and the first book of Kings. So the Netziv wonders why in our verse are those two words flipped. And he uses this opportunity to give a bit of a definition of what does it mean to be wise, what does it mean to be understanding, these two words, Chacham, V'Navon. So he says that the word Chacham, which we normally translate in Hebrew as wise, the Netziv says that there's two different ways of understanding this word. The first is milumad b'davar mekubal v'yidiot harbe, someone who is very learned in a particular area and knows a lot about that area. So chacham can mean someone that we might say is knowledgeable, very knowledgeable about a particular area of thought or interest, has studied a lot about this particular thing. That's one thing that chacham can mean. The second understanding of Chacham is bar seichel v'charitzut, which means intelligence and diligence. So, the Netziv says, to be a Chacham, to be wise, can also mean some level of innate intelligence, but also diligence, that you apply yourself to acquiring information and wisdom. He says this is the meaning of a verse in Proverbs chapter 4, where the author states, Reshit chachma, kane chachma, uvachol kinyanecha, kane bina, which translates as the first order of wisdom is acquiring wisdom, and in all of your acquirings, you will acquire understanding. So the Netziv, using what he's discussing generally here, applies this to this verse and says that the explanation is that the Reshit Seichel v'charitzut, the first order, the first thing to do with wisdom and diligence, or with intelligence and diligence, hu shemitchila yikane yidiot harbe, that the first thing you should do with your intelligence and diligence is apply it to learn a lot of things. Ve'achar kach yikane be'amalo behem bina, and finally, remember, the verse said, ultimately, v'chol kinyanecha kaneh bina, through all of your acquirings, you will acquire understanding. So he says, you take your intrinsic intelligence and your diligence, and you apply them to studying, to acquiring knowledge, and through your hard work at knowledge acquisition and thinking through and learning and developing ideas, you will ultimately, through that, come to understanding. Understanding is a bina, and it's the same for the same root of one of the two keywords we began with, of navon, is a deeper level that you can only come to understanding through having worked through ideas, problems, and thoughts. So he uses those definitions to now try to understand why it is that the words navon v'chacham are flipped in our verse from how they normally appear in Tanakh. Me'ata muvenet mashma'ut am chacham v'navon. So he says, so here's what it means later in the Torah and Devarim when the Israelites are described as a wise and understanding people. What does it mean? Shehema melumdim berov yediot, that they have learned many things, they've become knowledgeable in a variety of ways. V'gam nivonim hema b'yidiot halalu, and they've also acquired a depth of understanding through and about that which they've become knowledgeable. Now, what is he describing about the Israelites in Devarim? Well, they've learned Torah at that point. They've learned some things about themselves. Hopefully they've learned some things about God and how to be in the world as well. But, he says, that is not what the meaning in our verses here is. In our verse here in Mikeitz, the perush of navon is l'haskil al ruach b'nei adam v'yodea lahan higam. Navon, understanding, here means knowing how to influence people and knowing how to sort of order them and work with them. V'chacham, wise, in our context, means yediot hanechutzot l'davar ech lekayem hatvua. Here, wise means specifically how to deal with the situation of upcoming drought and famine, agriculture, and how to sustain produce. So normally, he says, these two words of navon v'chacham, when they come in the opposite direction of chacham v'navon, they imply an order of events. First, you have intelligence. You use the intelligence to acquire knowledge, which is chachma, and through working through those things, it will ultimately lead to bina, which is navon. But here, says the Netziv, it really means something completely different. Joseph is saying you should look for someone who has two particular qualities, knows how to work with people, and knows the specific knowledge having to do with agriculture. In essence, says the Netziv, that in our verse, Deshnei Devarim Hema Bifnei Atzmam, that the major difference is, as opposed to elsewhere in the Torah, when these two adjectives come up, they describe a spectrum or a development of thought and ideas. Here, they're independent notions, independent things that Joseph thinks that whoever Pharaoh is ultimately going to choose to lead during this period should have these two pieces to their knowledge. And he notes that the Ramban, Nachmanides, believes this to be the same understanding. The Ramban writes, Navon, sheyeda linahel am eretz Mitzrayim belechem, that Navon means you should know how to work with the Egyptians and their food systems. L'teit lehem kadei chayutam, give them just enough that they'll be able to live. And v'yimkor hamotar la'artzot acherot, and to sell any surplus to other countries. He goes on to define chacham as well. But interesting that for the Ramban as well, navon is very specific to the case we're talking about here. It means how to work with trade, food, agriculture, and the people. So the Netziv, in a very simple move here, asks the question about why are the two words navon v'chacham flipped from how they normally show up, and he uses it as an opportunity to teach us a little bit about what he at least thinks it means to be chacham, wise, or navon, understanding. Thank you very much. We'll see you next week. Shabbat shalom.